model provides less of a conflict of interest. It provides alignment, hence the name, but truly we're aligned with our clients. We're not incentivized by a particular person getting hired or a person getting paid a certain amount. We're like an in-house team member for our clients, and it's just much more aligned. It just also happens to be that it allows your budget to go further, which is great. Win-win.
Welcome to the Startup CPG Podcast. In this episode, we talk to Peggy Shell, who's the founder of Creative Alignments, our Startup CPG partner for recruiting. Peggy is such a pro. She taught me all about how to recruit and hire on your own, all of the watch outs and things you really need to get right, with a big focus on being really transparent throughout the process. This is a really inspiring model and conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. If you want to reach out to them, and I really believe they are the best partner for early brands because they will save you so much money with an hourly model instead of some kind of 30% of a first year salary crazy fee, you can email them frank@creativealignments.com or peggy@creativealignments.com, and be sure to mention Startup CPG for some special perks. Enjoy. Welcome to the Startup CPG Podcast. Today, I am delighted to have Peggy Shell as our guest. Peggy is the founder of Creative Alignments. They're our trusted recruiting partner. They have this unique hourly billing model called time-based recruiting and extensive CPG industry experience. They have revolutionized the way that a lot of startups are building their teams for growth. They save an incredible amount on recruiting costs. None of this like 30% of a first year salary type stuff that early brands can't afford. So I love talking to Peggy because she has worked with so many brands from the community, mission-driven startups to established brands. Her team has helped companies of all sizes find talent that they need to succeed. I'm really excited to get into this podcast where we're really going to cover a lot of DIY type recruiting elements. Very excited for everybody to learn from her experience. Peggy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Super glad to be here.
Yeah, I love this topic because, as somebody who's been an operator, I've gone out for hires and just like shock of a lifetime where you're like, oh, I guess because, I tried posting on LinkedIn. I didn't really get what I was looking for. So, are there recruiting agencies out there? Maybe I'll reach out to one. And then So then they're like, yeah, we can help you. It's going to be 30% of their first year salary, which, if you're finding like $150K type person, that's going to be the worst check you ever write. It's like $50K for a hire that, man, if your network was just a little bit bigger or you got the right timely, referral from somebody, or even worse, like you start with them and then someone's like, oh, I have the perfect person for you. And you have to actually put them through that process because you're working with them already. And it's just like, oh, it's so bad. The $50K.
Right.
It reminds me of like my first apartment I got in New York, where New York, for apartment rentals, you basically have to use a broker. It's not true in California. And then, you're writing a similar size check and you're like, wow,
and you're committing your firstborn's, first year salary too and everything else. No, it's actually how I got into recruiting, believe it or not, because I started as an in-house HR person. I didn't really have experience. This was just kind of a known entity that hired me to help with their HR operations, really figuring I could learn on the fly. And recruiting was one of the things that I was tasked with. And so I hired an external recruiter, and it was 2 hires, and it was like $50,000 or something, the checks. And these were okay hires in the end, and I know that they were, because I was so green, I know that they were like pretty much their first few candidates. They didn't spend a ton of effort. And I literally was like blown away. I mean, I knew obviously going into it how much it was going to cost, but I remember telling the founder of this company, like, I am so sorry. I will learn recruiting on my own so that you do not have to pay this check again. So that was really like, that was it. From then on, I was like, nope, that's not going to be how I do recruiting, both in-house and externally. So
Yeah, that's wild. And it's sort of like if you're going to pay some crazy fee like that, if you're going to hire like two people a year, that's basically a full-time recruiter
yeah,
salary. You might
yeah.
as well at that. I never understood why people were bringing recruiters in house, but then I saw that number. I'm like, well,
Oh,
that
I
makes
get
sense.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No, it's
So
good.
good.
I mean, listen, single hire, super crazy important, budget's not an issue. Like, I understand why people make that decision once in a while. It's just not repeatable. And that's what Creative Alignments allows, is for smaller companies that don't have quite the same budget to over and over again use us for their hiring while they're scaling. Because like it's, you know, great that you could use an external recruiter for one hire, but don't you want to be able to have that be a repeatable performance and thing you can lean on? So yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. So I totally agree.
Thank
And
you.
this is anyone in the community knows why this is why I'm so supportive of you
Yeah,
guys, because
thank
I
you.
know so many people who have worked with you
Mm,
and like, yeah, you can find the hires basically paying a very
yeah.
reasonable hourly rate. You get great people
Hmm.
and it's not just like starter stuff. You can fill your whole exec team, even if you're a big brand
Right.
using you guys. Cause yeah, I mean, like, you guys are experts and you have years of experience, but like, it's not like this process is unknowable, like how
Yeah.
it actually works. And you
Yeah.
can like, yeah, you don't need my 50K to make a business actually work in recruiting. Like that's such a crazy amount. Like, so kudos for you. And I think
Yeah.
it's a big
Thanks.
service to the community for you building this
Great.
model that actually makes sense for brands.
Yeah,
So
good, good. And really, cost wasn't even necessarily the reason we've stuck with the model. The model provides less of a conflict of interest. It provides alignment. I mean, hence the name. But truly, we're aligned with our clients. We're not incentivized by a particular person getting hired or a person getting paid a certain amount. We're like an in-house team member for our clients, and it's just much more aligned. It just also happens to be that it allows your budget to go further, which is great. Win-win.
yes, we need that money. We need it to pay for other
Exactly.
for other stuff and like unexpected random California
Yeah.
lawsuits and what all just
Yes.
the gauntlet, the full
Yes,
gauntlet. So
yes.
so in a second, I want to like really get into what DIY recruiting looks like also. But just to start out, can you, because I know you've worked with a bunch of people in the community, do you
Yeah,
mind just kind of like giving a tangible example or two of like,
yeah.
here's who it was, here's what we did for them, and like really this is how much money you can actually save?
Yes. Yes. Well, we started because we're based in Boulder. I mean, there's such a mecca of the natural products industry here in Boulder. And so it started as kind of like a cute set of referrals. And I say cute because I always thought like, oh, I mean, not knowing the natural products industry at the time, like these were brands that I loved to eat, but they were small. Right. And so we worked with a number of those. And then our experience grew. And then we got referred to our X Bar. And they were about 15 people at the time. And we ended up being their main recruiting partner up until they got bought by Kellogg's. And they introduced us to Halo Top. We did 90 hires for Halo Top in 1 year. And it just really grew from there. So we have a ton of experience. Half of our business is in natural products now. The other half is in technology, really focused in climate technology. And so we've worked with some of the fastest growing brands. Like I said, those two included. I know a part of your community is Fourth and Hard. I'm looking over to my left here because I just pulled up their stats. We did 3 executive hires for them. So we placed their VP of marketing, sales, and operations. So all 3 of their exec team members. And in those 3 hires, we averaged 8.5% of the first year's salary, and we saved them almost $100,000 compared to a 25% contingency recruiter. So, I mean,
That's
kind of
so
a
wild.
no-brainer, right?
And
Yeah.
I know, well, yeah, my friend Max is the CEO there,
Mhm.
and he was, formerly the CFO. So I can tell you for sure he
Yeah,
knows what to
right.
do with that 100K. He's
Yes.
gonna make some magic happen
There
with
you go.
that.
Exactly.
So that's awesome. And yeah, he's been a huge
Yeah.
supporter of
Yeah.
yours, and actually is the one who introduced us as like, hey, for your community, you should meet these guys. Like
Yeah.
this is a very
Yeah.
good model.
He's
So
he's
yeah,
awesome.
and that's crazy about Halo Top. So they were hiring like 2 people a week,
Yeah.
right? When they hit that
Yeah.
like early
Yeah.
trajectory where everyone's like discovered this like,
Mhm.
low
Yeah.
cal pint that
Yeah,
you
and I
could
think
eat.
for them, we averaged about 4% of the first year salary. It was just really low. It was really fast, the recruiting process.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they were a rocket ship. But we've had others. Cauli Power, I think we placed like 60 people for. over the years as they grew. And Olipop, we were their growth partner until they brought it in-house. It often makes sense that at some points, a company brings it in-house, and that tends to be the graduation, if you will.
I imagine you guys definitely do a lot of executive level searches and like heads of marketing, and even like, you need a director of sales. And what about even all the way down to like, hey, I need a sales rep just for like Los Angeles who's
Yes,
got some good beverage
absolutely.
experience?
Yeah. And I'll just, look at, so like Cauliflower is a great example. We, just to give you a sense, actually it's 46 hires. We saved them almost $700,000 over those hires. 9% of the first year salary is the average. And, to give you a sense of some of the names, SVP of operations, so that's executive. We've got some VPs in there, but we have field marketing, field sales marketing rep, brand manager, shopper marketing manager, associate director, marketing, a customer service representative, a trade spend analyst, supply chain manager, so it's across the board, all levels too. Yeah.
And I know these savings are if you were paying kind of like a reasonable, like 25%, quote unquote reasonable for one of these big agencies, but like, yeah, it can be up to 30%.
That's right.
Could be
true.
even more.
True.
And I think with you guys, it can be like, I don't know, maybe 10% or something if you're kind of doing one-off hire, and then it can go down if you're, when you start to scale.
I'm just pulled a random one, but VP of supply chain for Cauliflower, 29 hours it took. So that was, that's, I don't even know the salary, but probably, 3% of the first year salary or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try not to give out anyone's salary here, not to dox anybody's
I don't have it on this
pay.
chart. Yeah,
we'll tell the bank account amount.
Yeah, exactly. Here's their name. Here's their social security number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nope.
All right. Tune in next week for just net worth by individual. Okay. So, all right. So I'd love to just go through what people can actually do, even if they just want to try and do it on their own, because that's probably the first instinct for most people is like, let me at least give it a shot because we're scrappy. But first of all, like, what kind of a people plan should you have if you're like a new brand, you're starting, you're just the founder, maybe you raise a little bit of money, or you're just still kind of self-funding or whatever, and you're just starting to think about, hires and stuff. Like, how do you talk to people about like getting ready for that and how to think about it?
Yeah, there is a certain stage where even though we're less expensive, we're not cheap. We're not free, right? So there is a stage where companies are not yet working with us, but I work with those brands often. And I always say, augment yourself first. So if you're really great at sales and marketing, and that's your zone of genius, to use The Big Leap. I don't know if you've read that book. Excellent book, by the way. But to use that concept, figure out where you operate best, where you are, happiest, where things flow, and then augment yourself. So if you're really a visionary and you like to do strategy, most likely you're pretty good at sales and marketing because you can sell that passion. So augment yourself with an integrator or an operator or somebody who can really focus on the operations, or vice versa. I think an instinct is to hire a salesperson right away, and that's not a bad idea in consumer products. But I think as the founder, you're probably going to be the best salesperson unless it's just truly not your deal and you're just like a food scientist or, somebody who just is all about the food, then fine.
Yeah.
So I think, go ahead.
Yeah. Just to comment on that. It's like, I am so sales oriented, like as, a founder, and I love doing sales and I feel like I'm really good at it. I have so much passion for the stuff that I do, and it's always going to be really impactful. I hate finance. I don't care about it at all. I don't want to do it. So I would definitely bring someone on for that, and marketing, I don't feel like I understand either. Yeah. So those kind of things. Yeah. But even with like, PR type outreach, like, I've kind of made the mistake of bringing on like an agency early, like, great, you're going to get us a bunch of stuff. And then like, they just still don't get the kind of response that you as the founder would get if you can find the time, which, it's another kind of sales, but like just you personally reaching out to people with the passion. And, now, I mean, hey, we've got this podcast. I get pitched for stuff all the time. Like, if I get pitched by a PR person, like, I don't like, you're not even from our community. They obviously aren't, if you're the one pitching me and not them. And we just kind of brush it aside. And I just imagine it means so much more. Unfortunately, as a founder, you can't do everything, obviously. So you do have to like start finding people who can embody that same passion
That's right.
that you have.
Or scale yourself with some automations and digital stuff, which I'm the wrong person to ask about that. But yeah, and I would say like finance, you probably can use a fractional resource for a while or bring in somebody part-time. Same thing with some of these other like really just specific functions. I don't think you need that all in-house, but I do think I know there's this real trend towards fractional everything, and I know some brands have really had great luck with that. I don't think you can underestimate that no matter what your product or service is, we're all in the people business, and the stronger culture you have in your organization that you get to build from the people that you hire, that's going to bring so much goodness to everything. They're the ones communicating with your customers. They're the ones communicating with your brokers. They're the ones communicating with each other and, selling the brand. So I'm a fan of in-house. I'm a fan of thinking about culture early. As you bring people on, it starts from the second you put a job posting out there, to tell you the truth, right? It comes from how do you present yourself? What are the benefits? And I recognize when you're small, like I'm not talking traditional benefits, but are you going to meet somebody where they're at? Are you going to allow flexibility for them to pick up their kid from school? Are you going to recognize that they have doctor's appointments, whatever, and building it early in so that it can kind of have a life of its own is really going to help your recruiting plan. I mean, it just will. First of all, you'll have better retention, but then you'll have people refer their, people that they worked with before in, so that lowers your recruiting costs. And you can sell that employment brand at some point. You can market it and you can sell it just like you sell your brand to consumers. So, yeah.
That's pretty interesting to hear you talk about that. I mean, one, just on the like kind of fractional and consultants, contractor piece, I definitely make good use of that. And I think, for me, especially, it was important to do it to be scrappy because you can find great people. You can find offshore people. You can, using something like Upwork that does a great job of managing time also and kind of tracking things for you is great. But, that's like, I think the dream is really to have the team in-house because like you mentioned the culture is really important and having people be part of the team and just like, part of your mission, not just like one of the things that they do. And I think also eventually it is going to come down to things like your own time management because it is just more time to manage contractors if it's not just something that's so routine, right? Like you got to explain things more. You got to be spending more time with them. And, they're less likely to give you that extra juice from their creative brain to come up with some game-changing idea because they're up late at night thinking about your business. Like probably not getting that kind of
that's a great
special sauce from them, right? 100%. So like, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. Like I love using offshore people and contractors for stuff, but I really am excited to, at least for my business, continue bringing on full-time people. And it's also, it's not as hard as you think. Like, I mean, I just kind of have gone through the process of setting up full-time payroll and all that stuff. And I mean, you can do it through Gusto. I've talked to some people who work at small businesses and they're like, oh, they can't afford like health insurance and stuff, but it's actually not that much. I mean, I think they just don't know. They don't know how to do it, but actually if you do it, like there are good kind of like, entry level tiers and stuff that you can
you don't have to cover a huge percentage, but at least you're offering it.
Yeah, like it's available. People need that. So it's good.
I totally agree. And I think I think a lot of founders are short-sighted because they're cash crunched and they get short-sighted and they forget that if let's say you want the best, whatever, marketing person, salesperson, supply chain person or whatnot. You're like, wow, we're small. We really can't pay and we can't offer benefits. And it's like, well, first of all, you're going to get what you pay for a little bit, not entirely. But you also are going to lose if, let's say you do attract this great person, but you're way underpaying or your benefits aren't as great, they're probably going to leave. Then you got the cost of replacing them, not to mention that you maybe didn't get the full value from the best person you can get. So, it's a balance. You can't produce money you don't have, but you also especially if you're raising money, I always tell people who are raising money, be realistic when you're raising money so that you have enough to go to people's salaries at the market price.
Yeah. And I also I had a friend who was working for a startup, and gosh, they were like, great, we're going to bring you on full time, and gave her a super terrible offer. It was like low, and it did not have health insurance. It did not have equity.
Mhm.
And so then she went to negotiate it, and they were like, well, you're obviously not as excited about this as we
Oh
are. So
gosh.
then you're not the right fit. I was like, this is so unbelievable, because you're like underpaying this person and giving them no equity upside,
Yeah.
and you want them to work around the clock. Like,
Yeah.
nobody cares about your dream unless you give them a
That's
reason to like
right.
really
Get
be part
everybody
of that.
excited. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 3 parts, I think, to attracting and exciting people, and there's a lot of parts, but there's 3 things. One is, are you aligned in what the purpose of the company is? You know, is it low sugar? Is it health-based? Is it whatever? Is it a sustainable packaging? Something that they're excited about from the actual product. 2 is, do you provide them purpose internally and a sense of belonging? So do you see them as individuals? Do you honor them? Do they have a voice? Is that uncomfortable in the negotiation process? Like all of that stuff, it comes into play, right? And people want a place where they feel like, oh, I'm me. I get to be me here. And that's really changing. That's very much going to be the norm, far more than when we were younger. And then the third is the actual package. What is the employment value proposition? What are the benefits? What's the compensation? What's my professional development opportunity? Right? That make up this thing that make it worth staying for. So yeah, those are all.
Yeah, and and it'll be different for like different industries, and you can have like flex more on one. Like, okay, if
Yeah.
you're a reporter and you get a job offer from the New York Times, it's a bad salary, but oh my God, it's going to be the
Resume
experience of a
builder.
lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to learn so much,
Mhm.
and then you're going to go on to do just whatever you want. Maybe you'll win a Pulitzer
Totally.
along the way. Who knows, right?
Totally.
But yeah, but like most early startups are not going to have that kind of credibility. I can say like from my career, okay, I've had jobs where like, gosh, I believed in the product so much, and that kept me there. Like, even if I felt like I was undervalued or underpaid, or didn't just get what I was looking for there, like I just love the products, and like it was a good learning
Yeah.
experience, right? And then there are other companies where like, yeah, it's a good learning experience and I get paid well, even though I really dislike the culture.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I mean, hopefully, yeah, you get the Trinity, all
That's
3
right.
of those really,
Totally.
really cranking, and then you're in and you
That's
just
right.
stay there.
Yeah.
All right. So back to like how we actually go about,
Yeah.
recruiting people.
Mhm.
When do you think you actually need to go out and hire somebody? And let's say, like, imagine a scenario where you're very tight on cash,
Yeah.
and, maybe you're funding it out of a bank account. Maybe you have a couple hundred
Mhm.
K there,
Mhm.
versus a situation where you've raised a little bit of money. Like, how would you think about knowing exactly when's the time to do it?
Yeah. Different for everybody, and it depends on the role. The role is probably what makes it needed or not. First of all, I think there is a phase and a stage where hiring people who land in your lap through your network, as long as they're qualified, not just like your cousin's brother, sister, because they happen to, breathe and, can, read, but like, qualified enough, like, okay, that's all right. But your network will run out at some point. So definitely at that point where you feel like, gosh, I'm just not getting the referrals, like the strong referrals in, that's a good time to start to think externally. But even
What it?
earlier than that is like, it's really niche. You know that you're going to settle if you're just going to depend on applicants. You're not good or don't have the time to go source candidates, and we'll talk about that on how to do it. And you need to make sure that you are picking from the best talent pool and not just, settling for the best applicant. Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit
Mhm.
more, because that's
Mhm.
pretty interesting. Let's say, like, I've been in scenarios where, like, yeah, I was announcing a role or maybe about to, and someone was like, "Hey, do you like? I have a friend who's looking. Are you interested in this person?"
Yeah.
Like, how do you know if
Mhm.
that person is like, you talk to them, maybe you like them? Is that the right person, or
Mm.
like, gosh, there may be someone who's such a better fit out there. Should I go through all of the effort and process to do it? I might even piss this person off or lose them if I
Yeah.
do that.
I actually think it's always good to go through the same process, even whether you externally bring in a recruiter or not, and so the process may be you actually write a job description and think about what it is that this person's going to be held to, what makes them successful in the first 30, 60, 90 year of their time there. You do a job ad if you're going to go out on your own and market it. Think about a job ad different than a job description. Job description is like what you're going to hold them to. Job ad is marketing. So think about like, how do you sell it? I think it's good to get clear on the same, let's say 10 questions that are behavioral based. So behavioral based means tell me about a time when, or tell me about examples from, or what was an experience you had that, and those then allow you to know what's actually happened in the past, so you can use that to know what might happen in the future, rather than asking a question like, are you organized? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm organized, right? But instead you say, tell me about a time where your organizational structure didn't work for you and you had to adjust it. Or tell me about a time when you were so fortunate to have had such a great organizational system, right? So that's behavioral based interviewing. So figure out your, set of questions that get at what actually matters for that role. So every role requires something different. It may be like, this person's really introverted, but actually for this role, it's good. It's an analyst, or it's a supply chain person or something where it's like, well, maybe that wouldn't be, but whereas like if you get a really shy, quiet person who you're going to put in a sales role, that may not work depending on yourself, so figure out the skill sets, figure out the experience sets, write those questions and try to be consistent when you interview everyone. And I would say, don't just hire the one person, like always have some comparative set. It doesn't have to be 12 people. It can be 2. And if your gut tells you, gosh, this person's awesome, you don't have to wait until you have a slate of candidates to compare them to, maybe one other, right? But don't lose them in that process. And it's a fluid process, in my opinion. I think traditional recruiting firms try to like slate candidates. Here's your bunch. And that's just not how people work. You might lose some of the best ones in the process if you wait for that. So is that answer?
Maybe.
Yeah,
it does. Yeah. And I was just thinking maybe you and I can work on like a list of 25 or 30 behavioral questions that everybody can kind of choose from for their own like
we have a database of that, and there's lots of resources out there. If you type in behavioral based interview question for compassion, behavioral based interview questions for organization, like you will find things.
That's great. Sorry. No, I totally agree with you from a negotiation standpoint also about having multiple options, because it's so easy as a founder who's minding your budget, you might say, okay, this person's great. And then you get into the negotiation, it turns out they're asking for more, or there are things you didn't understand. Mm-hmm. And then, if you don't have, ideally you have 2 candidates that you like both, and then, okay, you can make a decision. Like I can take this person, but they're asking for 120, or this other person's asking for 160. Like, okay. Like, you need that extra 40K for the next thing you're going to need. So,
and one other suggestion, especially for early stage companies, whether your state requires it or not, which only a few do at this point, Colorado, New York, California, there's something called pay transparency. It's really to try to create equitability, gender equitability, as well as racial and ethnic, so that what you've made in the past doesn't determine what you get offered in the future. You should get offered what you should get offered, regardless of your race, gender, etc. So I'm a big fan of it. I've seen it play out in Colorado. It is very hard to implement later. So if you are an early stage company, think about pay transparency from the start, which means you create kind of bands of sorts, even if it feels forced and you don't totally know yet. And when you market the job, say what the range is. It can be a range. It should be pretty small, that range, not like, 60 to 120, depending on experience, but like it could be 80 to 100, depending on experience, and have that be a really open conversation early. It's going to help you avoid a lot of headaches.
What's the downside of having a broader range? Because I think that's probably what most people would be like, like, how am I going to define this? What if they have more experience than I'm expecting? Or what if I can get someone good who's really inexperienced?
Yeah. Well, what you can do in that situation is you could market it as a lower level role, and you can always up it for a person to a title that is in the next level. Mm-hmm. So maybe you market like a marketing associate, and you can make it a marketing manager or something. But the disadvantage, well, first of all, in the states that require it, like I mentioned, a broad range isn't even legal. It has to be defendable, or whatever the word would be, so that if somebody came back and said I was discriminated against, you can say, well, no, this is the range. But it also, everybody's going to want to be on the higher side. I mean, they're just going to negotiate for that. So I think you want to be within a range where you can say, no, here's why you're at 80 instead of 100 or 85 instead of 100. But it's a lot harder. Like 60 to 120 is hard to like, if you're going to market that, that's hard to like know what to do with. Yeah.
And I think, just putting myself in the shoes of a founder, like negotiations are uncomfortable for sure. And like, it sucks if like also it's you're going to be managing them and you have to do it because it's not fun.
Yeah.
And it definitely can sour a relationship. But I think especially like as a founder, if you do have a couple options anyways, you're going to have a lot more confidence about sticking to the range and, based on their experience. And I mean, I think those.
It just avoids, it actually helps avoid the uncomfortable situations later. I've been, I wasn't sure how it was going to play out. Colorado implemented it maybe 2 years ago. And we were nervous because I was like, oh God, like this is just part of the game that we all play, right? Well, you know what? It turns out that it's actually like really targeted. The people who are comfortable with that range apply for the most part. Some people hope they can apply and then talk you up to a higher amount. And sometimes that happens, and then right away in the conversation, you say, here's a salary range. Are you comfortable with that? In Colorado and in other states, you cannot ask what they've made in the past. And I think that's going to become national at some point. So you cannot say, what were you being paid at such and such company? It's all about, are you fine with this range?
And you could say, are you fine with this range? Or maybe if you're in a state where you don't want to do that and it's not a requirement yet, could you say like, what's your salary requirement?
Can't say requirement. You could say something around,
what are you looking for?
You can't, technically, no. You technically cannot say that even I think, I could be wrong. Maybe in some states you can, but I think it's not wise though. That's always what I said for 20 years. That's what I asked. I believe now, if you say that, somebody's going to come back and say, well, here's what I'm making. And now you have that information. And now how are you not going to use that? So, and maybe that's good because you want to pay a little bit less if you can and still make the person happy. But I just think for like the good of society long term, I think it's best practice to say, hey, is this going to work for you that this range is going to be in here and you're probably on the low end of it given your experience set, or,
It's pretty interesting. I mean, just, to be very pragmatic about it, like, yes, every founder, I don't think they necessarily are like bad people who want to underpay people.
They want their money to go further.
They want, then they don't want to overpay either. And like, but anytime I have a friend who's looking for a job, the first thing I'll tell them is like, if they ask you what you're making, do not tell them.
Exactly.
And like defer that conversation to be like, well, maybe once I understand the role and the responsibilities better, we can talk about it. Or can you tell me the range for it?
Exactly.
Right?
Ask the range. Exactly. Like, can you tell me what what the range is going to be so that I can give you a sense of whether that's going to work for me or not?
Yeah.
And I just think once we all go to that's going to make things so much easier. Hence why I was saying, if you're an early stage company, like just put that in place from the start, make it super transparent, then you'll just avoid that later.
If you are open to people at more experience, because probably like you listed, if I'm a marketing director and I see a marketing manager role out there, probably most of the time I'm just moving on and not even applying to it. But like, do you typically recommend put in a bullet point that's like, hey, do you have more experience or do you want to talk to us? Like, feel free to.
Yeah, for the right experience, that we could be open to moving this into a higher level role or say the title. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's wise.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. So, all right. So let's say now I have the role that I want scoped out. If you're hiring, what is a good way to figure out what that range could be? What are some kind of DIY tools that people can use to figure out the right range for a position, whether it's remote or in a specific location?
You're talking compensation, right? Range? Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, truly not even just trying to give you kudos for this, but I imagine on your Slack channel, it's a great place to get a sense of does this feel like it's in the right range or not? So I would totally go to Startup CPG. There's a lot of tools out there like salary.com and things like that. Just know that those are job seeker input data. So people or can, people, those are people input data versus employer input data, if that makes sense. So sometimes people put in ranges that they hope to make or they want to make or whatever, and it's not necessarily 100% accurate. I think it's getting better. There are companies, like we work with Cura HR for our compensation reports. Those reports are employer driven data. So it's accurate. It's based on an actual census from employers who submit this data. So just know that. But I think salary.com and Glassdoor, I think that they can give you good general ranges. I would, what's the word when you socialize it? I would ask your friends. I would ask other founders. I would ask people in the industry. I would send a note to somebody you don't even know who you're like, they probably know because they've been doing this long enough, and say, random question. I know you've never met me, but I have this company and this is what I'm trying to do. And do you think this is in the right range? People like to help that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I've done that definitely, especially with like sales roles. With like, all right, well, let me ask another salesperson in that kind of a role.
Totally.
Now also know that they're probably going to like, they probably believe whatever their job is, it should be better paid. So they might give you something a little more aspirational. But I like the multiple sources of
and if you're working with us, we work on so many roles and we have so much data in our database of all the hires we've made that we share that information. Like, we think you're low. Doesn't mean you shouldn't go out with that. Just know that that's going to limit your talent pool. Or we think you're right in range, and that's great. And then we'll know better once we start talking to candidates. So stay tuned, that kind of thing.
And then, I think you mentioned the Startup CPG Slack. We do have the biggest free jobs board in the industry. I love when you guys post actually some of your roles. So that's a pro tip for job seekers out there. You can see tons of cool stuff, including the job openings that Creative Alignments is working on. I know you guys have gotten some great candidates through there, and actually like really cool stuff. Even like some people go CEO hunting on our job board as well. And like you were saying, you can read through a bunch of those postings also and just see what the salaries are that they're talking about.
Especially, and then you can look on Google too, by the way, for states where they have to post now. That's the other good thing about pay transparency, is you can find out salary ranges online.
And I think, I think I've used Indeed also.
Indeed. Yeah.
That's a good one for some like DIY. You can put in the location and the level and see some actual hire range stuff.
Yep.
Cool. So honestly, one of the biggest challenges that I had when I was trying to do it on my own is like, okay, I would set up the LinkedIn free thing, which I think they made a lot more difficult. Like, you can get like 15 or 20 links, like submissions that are all probably not good. And then they close your thing and you're kind of screwed. So like, I would maybe create a Google form and then try to post that on my own LinkedIn and a couple different places. And I don't know. I mean, maybe a third of the time I was able to find somebody by doing that. But one of the biggest problems is if I was hiring for like operations or sales, especially, I was not getting very diverse candidates. And like, I believe in diversity. I really want great, diverse people and thought in anything that I'm doing. And I was a little stuck. So man, this is not a diverse pool, and the responsibility, like really, I need to get out there and make sure that I'm like, sourcing great candidates for this. So what do you think? What suggestions?
No, I really appreciate this conversation. I am actually on the think tank for OSC and their Jedi Collaborative for this reason. The natural product, and I'm also involved with Project Potluck, but the natural product industry is woefully not diverse. It is, actually gender-wise, it is a quite diverse industry. But beyond that, skin color, ethnicity, LGBTQ, it is woefully not diverse. That means that you do have to put some intentionality behind the sourcing. If you post a job and that's all you do, you are not going to get a diverse talent pool in the natural products industry right now. That may change as the demographics of our country are changing rapidly, but that's actually only going to change by starting with like internship programs and things like that, in my opinion. And that's what we're working on. But so intentionality, sourcing. So what does that look like? It does look like LinkedIn, putting in something like this, the terms that you would normally put in, supply chain or whatever it might be, operator, operations, put in some of the keywords to get the right person, but then add something like Latin American or whatever, Black Chamber of Commerce or something where they're a part of some group as well. and just, keep changing that up, like people of color in quotes, or LGBTQ in quote, something. And I say in quotes because if you put multiple words together in quotes, then it keeps those words together and it doesn't split
Oh,
those apart.
are you talking about when you're searching for
Search
candidates
string.
on LinkedIn
Yep.
using the search mode? Okay,
Search bar in LinkedIn. Put in something that allows you to get people who are involved in communities that tells you that they're possibly more, part of diverse groups.
Because so like if you're just a regular founder, you probably don't even know how to search for candidates in the early stages. You're probably just posting a job on your LinkedIn and like your network, which I mean, for a lot of people are people who kind of look like you, whatever that is, like it'll get shared in that network.
That's
so
right.
yeah, it's not going to get, the post is not going to get its fingers, creeping into other networks where you really do want to make that post accessible. So yeah, it sounds like, intentionality may start with actually like, you need to get out there and start searching for some candidates.
That's also, by the way, another place where it makes sense to bring in a recruiter like us. I mean, and we can do a la carte work for smaller companies and just do some sourcing of candidates for you. But the intentionality is key. You're not going to get it from sourcing only, in my opinion. From posting only. And you need to then add in some creativity. The other thing to do is to go to organizations like Project Potluck. Great group. That's a group that is an organization in the natural product industry for people of color, period. That's what they stand for. So, and I don't know if they have a job board quite yet, but they definitely have like a community. So, so letting them know when you have jobs available. Like I said, the Jedi Collaborative, seeing if somebody's a part of that. There's others like Naturally Network has, I forgot what they're calling it right now. I'll come back to that, but there's another group called Included also in the natural products industry. So figuring out people who are part of those organizations might lead to more diverse candidates as well. And then just, putting the intentionality around networking ahead of time. I mean, part of recruiting is developing networks ahead of time so that you can lean on them when you need them, just like sales. So when you're at Expo or when you're at natural or, startup CPG events, like put some intentionality around the way that you network too, knowing that down the road you may be hiring. And if diversity is important to you, as it should be for all of us, to tell you the truth, we're going to have stronger organizations and it's going to make the world a better place. So put some effort around how you network there. Create an internship program where you go to the HBCUs and you invite them to, to be interns at your CPG brand. And by the way, think about your product, and is your product going to the diverse consumer that is going to be really wise for you to target now? And that's going to also help create a talent pool as well. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, and that's super interesting. And I had not gotten those tips before, so I'm really glad I asked you about that.
Good.
And I guess we'll also just on that note. So, like, let's say you fortunately get a really great, diverse candidate, and that's awesome. And then hopefully they come aboard and join you. What do you as a founder need to make sure that you then do to retain
I'm glad you asked that.
Diverse employees, but also just general employees in general.
Yeah, no, I'm super glad you asked that, especially around diversity, as maybe before you're doing the hiring at all, is make sure you have an inclusive place of belonging that they're going to be joining in the first place. Because
how do you know if you have that or not?
Yeah,
if you're because maybe you're like working remotely and you're like, I don't know, everyone just do your job. Like, what are you not thinking of?
Yeah, no, I love that. It starts from the leader. So really the leader has the opportunity to set the tone for the company. And really, again, it comes from building trust. That's the foundation. And making a place where people belong, where they feel like I am with people that I can trust. I'm at a place where I am seen as an individual. So it's a little soft, it's a little intangible, but I think a leader who puts intention behind that and how they lead, and it's not just about getting the work done. It's not just about, numbers and metrics, but it's about the holistic experience for the individual, creating time to connect, like in our all team meetings, we do it once every other week. it's only an hour. It's such precious time together and there's so much to cover. You would think that I would spend the entire hour on business stuff, but instead, every single time I make the first 15 minutes about connecting. We do gratitude circles. We do times where people can talk about what's on their mind, what's fun in their life, what their, holidays looked like, etc. So create opportunities to connect, create opportunities for people to feel heard, right? So making sure that their voice matters, like you actually act on the things that they suggest, you ask for their input, make sure that they feel like they're recognized as individuals. Like we send things for anniversaries and for birthdays and for weddings, and if somebody is sick, then we'll send a soup package, things like that. Like I personally call each of my team members to just check in and say hi. In fact, new people, when they start, they think they're getting fired or something, like, why is she calling me? I'm like, no, I'm just saying hi. How's it going? So those things matter, and those create a sense of belonging.
Yeah, sure. It's funny to think about. I think, one thing that I always try to remind myself to do is to just recognize when team members do something important. That's great. And throw the credit out there. Like, hey, this person did that. That's awesome. Like, really like try to lift them up. And I think, everybody likes that. Like, you want to feel good about your work. It's so important to all of us. And I think that I appreciate that also, having been an employee as well. And I think, my instinct is always just to like try to share as much of the credit, but take the blame. Like, that was always my approach as manager, is like, if something's wrong, that is my problem. Like if they made an honest mistake and I didn't see it, like that's my problem. But if they did something great, like let the whole world know. And what's funny about that is like, I will always be that way, because that's just like who I am. And I want people to like working with me and have a good experience on the team. And I always, like, I believe it just doesn't take anything away from you to share the credit with your team. Like ultimately, I think it should make people be like, oh, like they're a good manager. Look what they get out of their team. Look at these awesome people who want to work with them. But I did have one experience early in my career that was kind of wild, because I joined this company and to build out a new division with them. And then I immediately went and filled the team. And like, that was a cool thing for me to be able to do. Like day one, I was like, I got this. So like writing the job descriptions, going out, doing the recruiting plan, because we had to build this function at the company. And we hired 3 people. And if they're listening, they'll know what I'm talking about. But one of them honestly was just like one of the most talented people I'd ever worked with before. And I was able to, get like, he reached out and he was interested to come and join the company. And like, that was awesome. He just such a like remarkable talent, And so, and like, I was newer to that company and kind of that industry also. And so, and I was senior to him because, I was going to be, just in a senior role. And so over time, like then we had a new boss come in, and like I'm trying to negotiate my salary also, because I don't know why they were just so stingy about giving raises there, which is true a lot of the time. Like, get what you're gonna get when you come in, because it's hard to negotiate for raises over time.
We should talk about that.
Yeah, but then like one of the things the manager would say to me is like, well, I don't know why I would pay you that much when we have this guy on our team who makes only this amount, and he's like great. Like, yeah, like I brought you that guy. Like that's part of my value.
To make less.
Yeah, that's part of my value, is bringing people like that. And by the way, like you're never going to find somebody else out there like that in the world. I just happened to be somebody that they were excited to work with and attracted them here. But that did bite me in the behind for sure on that one. Although it was not my true calling to stay there, for sure.
Yeah. Wrong company, wrong leadership. I mean, that's exactly it. So did you feel belonging? Did you feel like recognized, appreciated, all that stuff? No. Right. So it comes to, I believe too, if a leader sets the tone like that and really lives their values, they attract people who also do. And then it becomes this goodness internally that spreads, back up.
Also, I think even when you do recognition of people also, like it is really important to be very mindful about it, because I also worked at a company where I think they're like, oh, they were a little tight on cash. And I think the HR team came up with, well, let's just start recognizing people publicly in front of the whole company. And then they would do like 1 or 2 people a month. And I'm just sitting there like, well, where's mine? Like, I worked my butt off. I did this stuff that everyone was like, that's
Right.
epic. And I didn't get recognized at all. Like, well, what's that about? So, I mean,
Right. You
being
just
like
be careful of that. Yeah.
hopefully everyone out there is not as, petty and needing to be validated as I am, but
By the
some of them
way,
are.
most are. It's really, really, really good to know. Yes. Really good to keep in mind.
Yeah. So you got to get out there. If you're going to do that, make sure you're, really
I'm not a
recognizing a lot of
fan
people.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the like employee of the month kind of thing because you end up with that. So I think it's real time, it's fluid, it's in your LT meetings, we have a kudos Slack channel, I mean that kind of stuff where it's real time and you just feel that little like boost of dopamine more often than not. Yeah,
I love it.
Recognition's huge.
And just not even with your company, but even with like suppliers that you worked with. Like I had a vendor that I worked with who I just loved so much. And I knew the person that I worked with at the vendor had a big meeting with the president of their company. And I just texted them a little video of me talking like, hey, I just want to tell you what an absolute pleasure it is to work with this person. They are freaking genius. They have impacted our business so much. And just thank you for having them and letting us work with them. And then she showed it to the president of the company. And then he sent back a video also that was like, that's incredible. And like, yeah, like your business is awesome. I loved hearing about this. And it just means so much to everybody. So like, it costs you nothing. Yeah. Just
you
like
nailed
takes
it.
10 seconds.
Yeah. By the way, I mean, I know we're talking about recruiting, but it's all intertwined. And as leaders, remember that stuff. It matters. Little things matter like that. Like it took you very little time. And I know that's for a vendor, but by the way, that helps with the vendor. I mean, all of it is goodness. And we need to, and I think we are going to a place as a human race where we recognize the old school form of authoritative dictatorship leadership is just gone. It's done, at least in enlightened communities like ours. And it's not helpful. We need to go to where leaders are people. Leaders recognize that like leading with empathy, leading from their heart, being vulnerable themselves, those things matter. They add to the culture. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like, yeah. If you're hiring people these days, like, yeah, it's not, I don't know if you watch like Mad Men or something like way back when, whatever. It's not like, okay, you're like, you graduate, you become the president of the company. Everyone's just going to do what you say and not question it and whatever. Like, no, it's very different now. People have so much of their identities wrapped up in work also, and like want to work places that mean stuff to them. And I think also like, gosh, conversely, I mean, probably I'm not alone in this either, but like I can have some slight that is either real or imagined that happens at work. Maybe it's my manager, maybe it's, I don't know who else. And that will fester in my mind. And I'll just like, and I could be making the whole thing up in my mind also. And it like can really just impact you so much and just completely disassociate you from the company over time. Right.
Right. But if you had a boss or a place where, hey, can I just ask you about this situation? Was this? And then the boss gets to say, oh my God, I can't believe you took it that way. I'm so sorry I said that way. No, that was not intended. Or you know what, Daniel, like I have been noticing such and such and such and such. I should have come to you sooner to talk with you about it. But yeah, I need you to pick it up or whatever. Then it's just, there's transparency. That's actually one of my personal core values and part of also back to the question of like compensation. If you're transparent internally with your organization's finances, if you're transparent with your organization's finances, it just makes for a much less like, why did I not get a raise or why are they so stingy here or whatever. Like show it all, like just make it clear. Where are you at as an organization? What's going to take you to the next level? What's your break even? What's your goal? What's, et cetera. And I just think again, too few of leaders are comfortable doing that too. And if they can.
Yeah. Well, I like hearing that from you. And I think that's a theme and kind of how you approach business is all about transparency, I think, 100%. Especially with the model, the way you have it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just a little bit more on the negotiation process, getting back to like, okay, you have a candidate, you kind of know the range. When you are negotiating with them, do you have any kind of tips for like, how to do that in a way that hopefully gets a fair outcome, but also doesn't ruin the relationship? Like, let's say they're asking for more, they're asking something you can't do and you don't think it should be, like any tactics that you would recommend?
Well, early, or I've already said this, but early communication around compensation is like a million times, proactively helpful. So it's, if you can set a clear expectation at the beginning, if somebody comes back totally off from that, then shame on them. Then, you were clear. They came back, were they just hoping you were like, and that happens, by the way. We have candidates that we lose like in the 11th hour because they're like, well, I asked for this in the negotiation. You're like, wait, but we made it clear it was over here. Right. So, but make it clear early. If they come back with something reasonable, I say try to meet them if it's equitable within your organization. You factor in an extra $10, $15, $20,000 over a year. And I know that's money, it's real money, but if it makes a difference to their happiness and how they're going to show up, and you can even say, hey, I'm really stretching for you here, and here's what the expectations are. I'm going to be really clear and that kind of.
And you mentioned before about having bands. So like, okay, here's what a manager can make at our company. Here's what a director can make at a company, a VP. And at least that also gives you like, hey, this is factual. This is what we're able to do in that band. Yeah. And it's kind of weird to do that if you're very small, but like, at least then it's not just like the worst situation to be in is like one person's like, I just want more. And you're like, well, I don't want to just give you more. Like, and then it's not based around any kind of metrics.
Right. Exactly.
Like
there's
data
no fairness.
or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think setting clear bands, stating early what the comp is, making sure you're in alignment with an actual question. Is this going to work for you? And then, if they come back with something reasonable, try to meet them so they feel heard, or give them a little bit. They're probably coming in specifically high, so then you could come down below that, right? That's human nature. But, or let them know what they can do to get to that place, or let them know that you're just not going to be there. And here's why. You already figured out what the plan is for the funding, and we're just not going to have an extra $20,000 this year. But if you help us get to the next level, like you'll get there, or adjust it with equity, potentially, if equity is a part of the equation.
And speaking of equity, do you think that all early CPG founders need to be offering up equity, that it's the right thing to do?
No, I think it depends.
Maybe not to.
I think it depends on your goal. If your goal is to exit and you want to exit in the next, 5 to 10 years or something, or you're really trying to grow quickly and scale, yes, because then you're aligned. Then you have a team that actually is aligned with your goals. If you're trying to build just a great business, lifestyle business, or maybe someday you'll sell, but that's not necessarily on the table now, I actually think equity is confusing. And I think you're better off just paying at market or above, and recognizing that over time you could always add equity into the mix. A lot of people, how many businesses do you know that have really had huge exits? There are some, but it's a small percentage of the number of startups and CPG brands out there. And not to discourage those founders, but the fact of the matter is people and employees are kind of devaluing equity a little more than they used to. Yeah. They're just not, they're not seeing it as like, oh, I'll take 60 grand less than I otherwise would because I have 2% of the business. Like, it's just not.
Okay. So let me ask you another question. If let's say you find someone you like, what do you think about getting references and even backdoor references, which is what a lot of people do? They'll be like, oh, actually, I know someone who was at that company. Check real quick.
Yeah, you got to be careful with those for sure, especially if they're currently at that company. Like, that's just, morally, you gotta respect that this person's probably looking anonymously or, not openly yet. So I think with backdoor references, I'm a bigger fan of asking the person, hey, I know Joe at such and such company where you had worked. I would love to talk to Joe. Would you be okay with that? And then you'll know if they're like, ooh, don't call Joe. And, then you're kind of like, wow, there's something there. But then if they're like, yeah, oh my God, I love Joe. He would, then you kind of have an extra affirmation. My personal opinion about backdoor references, I totally get them, but I think there's a respect and a moral piece of it too, that you can play that by being transparent.
I like that point that you just made. And I honestly, I don't know, it seems so simple and obvious, yet I've never thought about that. I've never heard anyone suggest that. Like, ask them, hey, I'm going to check with this person. Is that okay? Like, I'm interested in you as a candidate. So
I know you only gave me Sally, Sue, and John, but I happen to know Joe. I'm going to call him if you're good with that. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing anything that was, and they may make up some bullshit, in which case then you're like, you get to decide whether or not that's accurate or not, like, oh no, Joe, Joe didn't know me, whatever. I don't know. But at least you've stated your intention. You don't even have to ask permission, by the way. You can just state that you're going to. But if they're at that current company, just be respectful. If they may be like, oh, not yet, you can't call them yet, I haven't given my notice.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't have that in mind. Current company. That would be it. That could be.
But by the way, references themselves are awesome. I'm a huge fan. I know a lot of people say, well, they've given those names, of course those people are going to love them. I always flip a reference on its head, and the very first thing I say is, I know that you're a fan of Daniel. You're here representing Daniel. You don't care about me and my company. So you want to make sure this is a great fit for Daniel. So I really want to have an honest conversation to make sure that we have a fit for Daniel. Okay.
I love that. And that's so good.
So then now you've started from a place of them thinking about, I'm not just trying to get Daniel this job, but I'm trying to really be honest about whether we've got a fit here. So you can ask questions that then get at that.
That's an incredible framing of it. I love it. Okay. So any other interview tips or things that you see people really getting wrong? We talked about the behavioral questions and having a consistent grid, but anything you see people doing where you're like, no, don't do that. Don't ask that, or don't do it this way.
Yes, definitely look up your legal questions. First of all, you can find those anywhere. I can share those with the network, but just, make sure you're not asking questions. The biggest rule of thumb is ask questions that are relevant to them getting the job done. Right. So you can't ask where they're from or who they're what their siblings do. They have kids, that kind of stuff. Don't ask that. But beyond the obvious things, a lot of people think would I enjoy having a beer with this person? Okay, maybe that's important, but it may not be. Right. And then you end up with this homogenous group instead of a diverse group. So I think more importantly is, what are they going to contribute to the culture? Versus do they look like me? Am I comfortable with them? Am I, that kind of thing. So I think trying to take out the social thought that almost everybody I ever talk to is well, I would love to hang out with them. Okay. Well, by the way, if you're going to be traveling with this person all the time because they're your right-hand person, or you're in the same group that travels, that actually is important. But if it's a remote company where you're going to be connecting on Zoom once in a while, that actually doesn't matter. So I think that's good. I think that's important. I think having a mix of who they meet with in the process and having it clear what each person's role is when they talk with them, so that everybody's not asking them the same questions and not everybody is vetting for culture. But, somebody's vetting for the actual hard skills. Somebody's vetting more for the culture skills. Somebody's vetting for the values. I don't know. But having a mix and I love one of the last phases of the interview process being with other team members, so that, and you set it up as, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions of what it's like to work here, which is also why you have to have a great culture. You have to trust that, the people who are there are actually going to say some great things. If you find yourself hesitant to do that last stage, that you've got some things you need to fix. Truly.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love a couple of things you said. One about also finding culture adds, not people who just fit with your culture, but will add to your culture and help you grow it and evolve it.
Yes.
And I think also, I just if someone, maybe it's not the person who's going to manage the team member that you're bringing on, but are going to work with them a lot, they're going to feel a lot better if they're in on that process somehow and get a chance to meet the person before you just kind of, otherwise, I definitely would feel that way. I guess, okay, you didn't even ask me. Now I'm just working with this person. I feel like I have value. I could have given you a good perspective,
And to that end, I think especially with companies that clients of ours, sometimes they want to hand off all of the process. Candidates want to actually hear from the hiring manager directly about things, especially if they're not a fit. If they've spent time on it, hiring managers should call that person, especially in consumer products category, call that person directly and say, hey, I really appreciated your time. We've decided to go with somebody else, or we decided your experience wasn't deep enough here, whatever it is. And, but I appreciated your time. And you know what? That person is probably going to refer somebody else to you, or they're going to still eat your cereal or whatever your brand is. But if you leave it to a recruiter or the HR person, or you otherwise just send them an email or something, you didn't honor the time that they spent there. and they're probably going to be an anti-fan of your organization,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
you don't want that.
Yeah.
You don't want
I
that.
believe, and I mean, at least like let people know,
Oh
if
my
they're just
God.
left
Yes.
hanging, they're going to hate you. And people can usually handle the, the rejection is you give it
Yes.
to them and, with
Most people.
dignity
Yep.
and
Exactly.
graciousness. And
That's right.
I mean, honestly, like, only a couple times have I really gotten some
Yes.
nasty, like you wouldn't know a good hire if you
Exactly.
saw one,
Whatever.
like very, very
Then you're like, oh
rarely.
my God, I'm so glad that I didn't, pursue.
At least they get it out at you instead of just like then going on
Exactly.
an internet rampage.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so that's super helpful. And
Good.
then so what about a scenario where like, okay, you found someone, if you're an early founder, like honestly, it's even hard to know exactly what are the things you really need. Like if you're hiring a salesperson and you're early on, like a lot of people are going to seem very impressive to you, and you may not know for a
Yeah.
while into working with them, like, okay, this actually wasn't they did not have actually the skill
Yeah.
set that I needed, maybe because I didn't know what that skill set was.
You just said it. Yes, exactly.
And what do you do? Let's say you're like 3 months in and you're like,
Yeah.
probably inertia and cognitive dissonance will prevent you from knowing that as a founder with this person who maybe is
100%.
not working out.
Yeah.
But like, do you think people should be evaluating that after just a few months or
Yeah.
like after a year? Or like, what do you do if that does happen?
Yeah. A few thoughts there. First of all, salespeople are easy to get sold, so they may or may not be the right fit, but if they're a salesperson, they may sell you. So that's where behavioral based interviewing is super important, where you really get it. What have you actually done? That's similar. But I think backing it up, like you said, is try to get really clear on what success looks like from this person. What are the results that you want to attain from this person so that you can then vet for that in the interview process and talk to others in the industry to understand what has and hasn't worked for them. Okay, so that's one. Like, how much is this digital marketing? How much is this actual hunting? How much do they need a Rolodex of contacts or not? Like that kind of stuff. But if you get to a place where you mishired, you're like, oh no, or maybe mishired. First of all, I do think it takes time. I have had countless employees where I at first was like, ugh, and then they turned out to be awesome. So I am not a believer of the big statement everyone says, hire slow, fire fast. Maybe I'm just too empathetic. I give people chances. Maybe I give them too much of a chance. But I've had so many times where I'm like, thank God I didn't part ways with that person. I've also had times where my gut told me from the start, I think I mishired, and then I hang on too long. So both are true at the same time. In that case, in any of the cases, I think it comes down to expectation setting and accountability. So if you're clear on what's expected of this person and you put accountability metrics in place, then it's quantitative more. It's not just a feel thing, especially for finance and sales. And I mean, some roles where it is pretty quantitative, whether or not they're doing their job. I think, not flexing on that. Now, you got to be realistic if you're setting some quota that is just not realistic for anybody. But if you have examples of where it's worked out perfectly great, then
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
I like hearing you say that, and just kind of reflecting on all the people I've worked with throughout my career. Yeah. I do also tend to want to stick with people more if it's an option, and and just being loyal to people who are loyal to you. And I think I also I never want to let someone go who is just doing the stuff that I would ask them to do and giving it their all and passionate about our mission. Like if you have those things, that is the hardest thing to find.
100%. That's right.
Yeah.
And by the way, the other thing then is if you're getting somebody who's it's just not working, there's probably something that's not working for them too. So you get to have those honest conversations and say something's not working. I just feel it. Do you? And what's going on? Is this the wrong role for you? Am I not clear enough? Am I not available enough? Am I too hard? Whatever. Yeah. And see if you can get there together. Yeah.
And I also find if you perceive something like that, they perceive it too.
100%.
So you can put it on the table.
Absolutely.
Put it on the table and talk about it.
You got that right. Yes. I think we just forget that. I cannot tell, I've been running my own business for 14 years now, and I've been in recruiting for 25. I don't even know. But people forget to be humans. We're all humans. CEOs are human. The people who are working for you, we're just people. We're all just trying to do our best. So have tough conversations in an empathetic way. And you're probably going to learn a lot and everybody's going to love each other more. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, truly.
I like that. It's so funny also when you have an issue and then if you like go to your family or friend or whatever and talk about it, like the first thing they're going to be like, well, did you try talking to them about it?
I know, and you're like,
oh, I can't believe I didn't think about that.
Totally. Yes. And I'll just give a tip of whenever I have a hard conversation that I have to have with a person or with a client that's unhappy or something, I just step back and I like take a deep breath. I'm like, how would I want to be talked with right now if I was on the other side? Like, how would if I was this person, how would I want Peggy to come talk with me? And then I try to like settle into that. And usually then it's much less of a contentious conversation and it's more of a, how can we find common ground? And how can I own my stuff? I actually, back to the big leap. I don't know if you've listened to it. I'm like totally in right now because I just finished it. But he talks about arguments between two people, two countries, two whatever, anything is about this misconception that it's 100% blame that has to get divided between the two parties. Instead, it's 200% and each party holds 100% always, no matter what. Even if like one is worse than another, the 100%, but like, if you have a problem with an employee on your team, if you have a crazy conversation with a candidate in the negotiation process, you're probably 100% to blame, and they are too, 100%, right? So like own your stuff of what you can own and change and adjust and recognize like, what can I be doing differently here? And you're probably going to see some beauty. Yeah.
Yes, there's no situation in life where I've been blameless.
Yeah, zero situations. Truly, I mean, well, just about, unless the person,
maybe just at least a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So, last question that I really wanted to ask you. I think sometimes founders struggle between like, hey, I need to go out and get somebody who's done this before and is really experienced, and they're obviously going to be more expensive. Versus like, hey, I think what we could do is go and get some people who don't have a lot of experience, but like they are, full of that like new to my career kind of energy. They're going to work their butt off. They're ambitious and, like they'll just crush it and I can kind of mold them into whatever because they don't have all this stuff. Obviously, there are like pros and cons of each of those approaches, but what do you see, having filled a lot of teams?
Yeah, very, very easy. 2 rules of thumb here. One, I'll use the example of creative alignment. So if I am looking for a recruiter, not a senior recruiter, but a recruiter who I know I could teach them recruiting, that's an easy enough thing to train on. It's clear enough. It's specific enough. What I cannot teach are the softer skills, the people vetting, the communication, the relationship building, that kind of stuff. I can't teach that really. People have that or they don't to a certain extent. I mean, you can give them tips. So I vet for the soft skills. I care very little about whether they've done recruiting because I know I can teach that. And I know that we've got the process in place to be able to have them slot in pretty quickly. And we've seen them successfully get up to speed within a short amount of time. So I think rule number 1 is think about what you can and cannot teach. There's some things you cannot teach and there's some things you can. Number 2 is how much does industry actually matter? Industry experience. So if it's, if it's about a certain set of buyers that you don't have access to yourself, and this is sales, can you find a way to help this person get in? And then the softer skills of how good they are at relationship building and selling matters. Or do you need, like, you just have tried hard to get in wherever, and you need somebody who knows the ins and outs there. So I think industry or have they done this job exactly matters sometimes. It does. I mean, I think an accountant in the CPG space, I mean, if somebody doesn't know cost accounting or they don't know, I mean, there's certain things that are like, they're pretty important. Could you teach that? Could they learn that? Maybe, but it's going to be a hell of a lot easier if they have some of that knowledge set already. So break it down. But I wouldn't let compensation drive the decision necessarily. I think that happens too much, meaning like I could just get somebody less expensive if I get somebody less seasoned and I can train them. That's maybe real to your budget, but I would have it be more around age and stage and experience actually doesn't matter. It's about the soft skill regardless of that, and whoever has the most of that, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great
Yeah.
answer. Thank you.
And I would not avoid more experienced people who are making a career shift. They are going to be super energized. So what a lot of our clients want is a lateral move. I want somebody who's done exactly this for this type of company and comes to me, and it's like, well, why? Why would they move to you? Maybe you got a little better benefit. Maybe you have a product that matches their purpose more. Okay, they're probably not going to be that exciting. So give people these like exciting shifts. Either it's a boost in responsibility or resume building, or it's a lateral shift from a different industry that they're pumped to be in natural products or different category, whatever, something that you can tell fuels their soul. And
all right.
Yeah.
Perfect. On soul fueling. I think that's a good note for us to propel our way to the end of the podcast with.
Love it.
So, Peggy, any good way for people to kind of follow along and to reach out to you guys?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we have a website, creativealignments.com, and you can see, we have under expertise, you can see all of the work that we've done in the natural products industry and the metrics and client logos and all that good stuff. You're welcome to reach out to me, Peggy at creativealignments.com, or Frank Milianti. He's our he's one of my business partners and our managing director of our consumer products practice. So Frank at creativealignments.com, or go to the website and submit a form saying you want to talk with us, and we would love to set up a time.
Okay, cool. If you do that, make sure you mention Startup CPG.
Exactly.
Thank you guys so much for being our partners.
Yeah.
We are very aligned with you guys
Very
in
aligned.
terms of
You got
just
it.
trying to, just great for us to partner together and try to give brands a better way to fill their teams and have the impact that they want to. So thank you again for your support of the community and for this very great podcast.
Yeah, it was
honestly,
super fun.
I loved this.
Yeah.
This was great. It's so much fun to talk to you about that stuff.
Absolutely. You and I are aligned. You can tell. It's good.
All right. Well, I will see you guys all on the Slack. Okay. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast today, it would really help us out if you can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I am Daniel Scharff. I'm the host and founder of Startup CPG. Please feel free to reach out or add me on LinkedIn. If you're a potential sponsor that would like to appear on the podcast, please email partnerships@startupcpg.com. And reminder to all of you out there, we would love to have you join the community. You can sign up at our website, startupcpg.com, to learn about our webinars, events, and Slack channel. If you enjoyed today's music, you can check out my band. It's the Super Fantastics on Spotify Music. On behalf of the entire Startup CPG team, thank you so much for listening and your support. See you next time.